So after the last video talking about ongoing caravan issues, I was going to jump straight into a few thoughts on the back of that. Namely, it's easy to point fingers at manufacturers and say you're not doing this right and not doing that right, but it's not so easy to come up with some solutions. And I was going to do that in the next video. The vast majority of people that responded to my last video with all their messages, and thanks very much for that. I do read them all. Some of them are quite long and it's quite interesting. Then there was one message there that said that they didn't agree with what I was saying, and that I should basically, not point out the downsides to all the caravanning issues because it's going to put people off caravanning. And that is, excuse me, that is a valid point, and it is something that I am well aware of. Now, obviously, you can't go back and read all the replies to the messages that I do get like that, where I have had people say, look, I was going to buy a caravan and now I'm not. That's the last thing I want, because my business is selling caravans. So, it's a bit silly. You could argue it's a bit silly of me going on the YouTube and saying don't buy this and don't buy that because of all these problems. And that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to stop the issue getting out of hand before it goes too bad. So the next video I'm going to do, I'm probably going to talk a little bit more about that and some of the things that I think that we could do about it. There's three things that we could do about it. Two of them you're not going to like and it ain't going to happen. One of them probably is something that hopefully is what could happen to solve this problem or look into it. Also, another message was saying, well, how bad is this problem? And that's something I really just cannot quantify. I don't know how bad it is, because we hear a lot about the negative side of things. So when I put a video up like that, I get lots of people saying, well, yeah, I had this problem and this is what I'm doing and I'm getting out of caravanning because of all the issues. You don't get people saying that they love their caravan and they have never had any issues and it's great and they're going to buy one in after 3 years worth of ownership. So because maybe they're not on the forums looking because they haven't got an issue, so therefore they're not engaging in that side of things. So it's very difficult to understand the scale of the problem, and it might well be a small problem. And again, I think I'll leave that to the next video. This video, I wanted to give you a bit of my background because you don't know who I am, and I'm just some bloke on YouTube talking about what's going on at the moment, but I wanted to kind of give you a bit of a background information as to why I'm still saying these things all these years later after been in the industry for so long. So this could be very boring, but it will give you some context as to where I am at the moment, and maybe help you to understand where I'm coming from. So I apologise if you switch off now and wait for the next video, because that's going to try to tackle the problems a bit more. But I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about where I've come from, and that message saying that I should basically keep my gob shut got me thinking, well, why am I doing this? It got me thinking, well, does it really matter to me if a manufacturer goes under or people stop buying caravans? Because I'm getting to the point where I'm kind of coming out of it. I don't sell new anymore. I'm looking at restructuring here at Atlantic. So to me, it doesn't really matter. But then I thought, this isn't the first time I've kind of not locked horns with manufacturers, but tried to point out some issues that I think could be bigger problems in the future. And the first time I did it, I was selling Fleetwoods back in the day at Stowford. I think it was 2004 or 5 we started doing that. And the thing is with Fleetwoods, they were really easy to sell because they were a high-end product, and especially at the shows, they presented it like that. So the stand was all black and chrome and it was glossy, and it looked stunning. And it was very easy to pick out someone who wanted to buy a Fleetwood, because they basically would come into this hall and look for the most expensive thing and assume that that was the best thing, so then they would just buy it. So I know you're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, and you hear all the stories about people going in their work clothes and they're multimillionaires and people ignoring them and all that kind of stuff. But you can't do that at the show. You have to pick who you think is going to buy these caravans, and they were the kind of customers that were buying the Fleetwoods were easy to see. So we used to sell loads of them. Now the downside to that was, along with that, they were used to buying high-end other goods, and so their level of expectation was kind of up here as well. Used to buying Jaguars and Beamers and things like that. I know you probably say that they're not very good either, but that's another story. But so their level of expectation was that I'm here to buy what is the most expensive thing in the hall, therefore it's the best, and therefore I'm not going to have any trouble with it. Now, the problem with that was that they were expensive, but it wasn't because of the reasons that people thought. They were expensive because they didn't have the economics of scale. So all the stuff that they bought, they couldn't buy in such big numbers as Swift and Bailey could. So that was more expensive. Also, the manufacturing process was more expensive, and I'll talk to you about their factory and the changes that I saw in that in a second. But so their processes weren't as streamlined, as cost effective as all the other manufacturers. So they were more money because they couldn't produce the product at a cheaper rate because of the way that they produced it. So we sold quite a few of them, and it soon became apparent that they were coming down the line, and the product wasn't that great, and it wasn't letting us down. So bearing in mind we were selling to high-end customers that thought they were going to be like up here in production wise and reliability, and then the things were just not staying up, not living up to that expectations. So when I was selling one, I used to not look forward to the next day because they used to stay on site with us, and they would come with a long list of things that are falling off and not working properly. It didn't matter how much time we spent on the PDIs. It was just the product wasn't standing up to their expectations. So it got to a point where I had a customer sat in front of me when I was at Stowford, and they wanted absolutely everything on it, and they wanted this and wanted that. Everything. Money was no option. No obstacle, and I turned around to him. I said, "I'm sorry, I can't sell you this caravan because it's just not going to live up to what you would think it is, and I'm going to be the one getting in the neck." Because back then and still now, when I sell a caravan, I kind of see it through. I don't just sell it and then it goes off to another department to get sorted out. It was something that I had to deal with myself, so I had to feel confident in it, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next video. So the customer kind of went off in a bit of a huff, and I thought, well, I thought I'd done him a favor. I thought he'd be happy, but he clearly wasn't. Next day I got a phone call. I got a message to go and see my boss at the time, and I think he'd had the Fleetwood rep on the phone, and he said that the customer had gone back to Fleetwood and said that one of your representatives wouldn't sell me a caravan, and he wanted to know why, and so did the rep at the time. And I basically said, well, give me the phone, I'll tell you exactly why, and didn't kind of hold back. I just said, look, the caravans are rubbish. I'm not putting my name to something that I know is going to give me problems, and the customer's not going to be very happy. So I'm just not going to do it anymore. So that was the end of that. And you couldn't really argue with it because they knew the problems and all this kind of thing. And it just got to the point where I just couldn't put my name to it, and I didn't want to sell them anymore. Shortly after that, they went into administration anyway, or Adria stopped selling them. There's two stories there. Which one, never you believe, I'm not sure. But they stopped selling them, so we didn't have to sell the product anymore. But it was a shame because it was a nice looking product. It just wasn't finished to the expectations of what the customers who were buying them expected. So that was one issue that I had before. So I just say I have done this before. The next one, and I've forgotten about this until it popped into my head after having a little bit of thought about it, is we then started selling Elddis, and we had a Buccaneer come down from the factory to sell to a customer from down this way in Cornwall, and when it came from the factory, it was just shocking. I thought it was a pre-production model that they put together to see how things work, and it'd been sat in the corner of the yard, and we'll chuck that one out because it owes us some money. It was that bad, to the point where we were shocked, and even when you lifted up the bunks where they put the external lockers in, the finish around the edge was all burred because of where they cut through, and it was just left open, and as soon as you lifted up the bunk to put anything in, you could see all this finish that was just not very good. And bearing in mind, again, Buccaneer, top level stuff. I think Fleetwood had gone by then, so it was kind of the next thing that people would buy would be the Buccaneers, and similar to Bessica, where they just wanted to buy the best thing that they possibly could, and Buccaneer was part of that their thinking. So again, that kind of customer just wasn't going to put up with that. Not saying that anyone should put up with it, don't get me, but you kind of know what I mean. So I then I think the year before we'd been up to Elddis to see the new products, and we'd been out on one of their do's, and we were sat around the table having an evening meal with all the people from the factory, and I was sat next to a person, and we got chatting, and he was asking me about the caravan industry and you know, and my thoughts and all this, and of course I told him. And then at the end he gave me his card, said, well, you know, got any more thoughts and you want to chat about stuff, drop me a line. And then my boss at the time said, you didn't know who that was, did you? I said, well, no, I didn't. And it turned out it was the boss of Constantine Holdings, which are the people that owned Elddis. And I thought, oh crikey, I hope I didn't speak out of turn. But anyway, forgot about it and put the card in my pocket. And then I thought, when I'd seen this product come down, knowing all the people at the factory and everything, I thought they can't know that this has happened, because they were really focused on product and getting the caravans right. And when I'd been up to the factory, the feeling was really good. And then getting this product down like that, it didn't match with what I'd seen at the factory and their ethos up there. And it felt a bit strange. I could only assume that they didn't realise that these products were coming out like that for whatever reason, I don't know. So I wrote a long email with all the photographs, and I sent it off to the boss of Constantine Holdings. And then a few weeks later, I got a message back saying that he doesn't get involved with that side of it, but he's passed it on to the factory. And then I got a message from the rep at the time who said that it caused a right stink, and they had everyone in from the factory in a boardroom, and my email was up on the big board with all the photographs, and it caused a bit of a stink. But it was only because I didn't, you know, we were trying to sell these products to these customers, and they were coming down like that, and it didn't match what I saw in the factory. So that's why I pointed it out. So that's the second time that I kind of said, look, I can't get behind these products if, you know, I don't feel comfortable with what the products are. I can't sell them. And that, I think, is the crux behind what I'm doing now. Is when you're trying to sell a caravan, you have to be confident in it. When I sell a caravan, I kind of put a little bit of my soul in with that sale, because I'm saying to that customer, this is something that I think is really good, and you need to spend, you know, you're trying to make them feel comfortable spending, you know, 20, 30, 40 or 50,000 pounds these days, but whatever it happens to be relatively, it was always a high figure. So if I say to someone, this caravan is great, this layout is going to do you really well, and this is ideal for you, and the product's going to stand up, and it's going to give you longevity of using it. But in the back of my head, I'm thinking, well, actually, that's not the case. I know this is going to come down in a bit of a state. I know that you're going to have issues with it. I know this is going to fall off, and that's going to break, and this is going to crack. I can't sell it. You know, I just cannot sell it. So what I was doing from the factories was I was trying to say to them that if you can install confidence in me, I can sell this thing all day long. But if you can't install confidence in me, I'm not going to sell it. That's something I just don't want to do. And there's lots of other salespeople out there like me who do feel the same, because I know them. I've been doing the shows for the past 25 years, and I've met lots of them. There are salespeople out there who don't give a hoot, and they're just a kind of a cog in a wheel, and they sell you something and then they move on to the next person, and then they don't have to deal with the fallout. But the people like myself who are in a smaller dealership, that we do have to deal with the fallout. I'm the person they'll phone up, that you phone up if you have a problem, because I've sold you the caravan. So I have to have this continuity all the way through the sales process, from the start to the end. And then even 2 years, 3 years down the line, I'm still the person you phone up if you've got a problem. I had one this morning, 2017. I sold a caravan to someone. The cant rail's packed up, and it's leaking through through into the caravan, and that was 2017 I sold that caravan. I had a phone call this morning. So luckily all the services have been okay, 10-year water ingress warranty, so we can put it through the warranty. So that, whenever I sell a caravan, I'm selling it for the duration of whoever owns that, and sometimes the next person. And that's why I have to have the confidence in that product to be able to sell it. Not just now, not just this year, but 10 years down the line, it still has to be good. And that's why I get so passionate about this, because it's not helping my job being able to sell a caravan, knowing in the back of my mind that I've got all these things going on. I've just sold a Bailey 2022, and the floor's going underneath, and and because of my videos, he got us to look underneath, and lo and behold, it's starting to go. Luckily, it's only just starting, so we can do something about it. But yeah, it's still a point that I'm trying to sell that caravan, and I know what the issues are. And so do my customers now, because they're watching these videos, and it makes it very difficult for me to sell my own caravans, after what I've been saying. So I do have this kind of conflict between what I'm saying and what I'm trying to do as a living. But it's better to be upfront and open about these things than it is to not say anything and just say, I know that's going to be like that, but I'm not going to say anything. I just can't do that. So that's where I am with where why I do these videos, and hopefully that gives you a little bit more context into my background. And this isn't the first time I've done it. Now, another reason I do this is because I have been around for quite a while, and I've seen things happen in the industry before. And the one thing you can do from history is learn from it. So I was around, I think Avondale, obviously I was around with the Fleetwood because they stopped. The one thing I was going to say about the factory actually, which was really interesting, is that when I first went to the Fleetwood factory, it was like going back into the 70s. It was a boys' club, and there was titty posters everywhere, and people were smoking, and it was a little bit kind of like, crikey, is this a factory? It's the only one I'd seen. Then it got taken over by Adria, and a guy came in and completely changed it. And after being to the Adria factory, I know why now, because you go there, it's a totally different kettle of fish over there. All the posters are gone. They realised that there was a lot of damage being caused by the people in the factory, and they wondered what it was. There was little dents everywhere. Turns out it was their belt buckles. So as they were leaning over to do something, belt buckle would hit the side of the van, and then they'd have to spend more money on getting that fixed. Also, the airlines used to hold down in the big knuckle where they join it together. We used to hit against the side of the van. So they came up with an ingenious way of fixing that, wrapping tennis balls around it, which was really clever. Lots of people got made redundant because they weren't there to really do. They were just there to get their wages, and off they went. They didn't care about the product. So he went in there and kind of changed the ethos in the factory. We went back, and it was a completely different kettle of fish. I mean, it was just chalk and cheese. And after walking out of there, I remember the feeling of, right, that's Fleetwood. That was Fleetwood back then. This is Fleetwood now. The product was great. It looked fantastic. We knew we could sell it to a high-end customer. Yes, it was expensive, but if it stood up to to the level of criticism that it was getting, if it could do that, we could sell lots of them, and it could have been really good. And then for whatever reason, unfortunately, it might have been a year later, they stopped trading. Might not have been even that long. But it was a shame, because the level of kind of not expectation, the level of confidence I had in that product coming out of that factory after seeing the difference between the old way and the new way was up here. I knew I could go and sell lots of those things, because people buying off of me could see the enthusiasm, and I'd use that as an example. I would be talking about the factory and how good it was and the difference between the two. So when I was selling to a customer, they could, I would be telling them this story, and they would then it's infectious, because they could see my enthusiasm for it. So I knew I could sell lots. But then Adria shut them down, and I think it was only because of they wanted to use the ground for something else. I don't think it was the fault of the product, because I could see it, it carrying on being quite good. But for whatever reason, they closed it down, so Fleetwood were no more. But that was an example of what could happen, and the difference between just a different ethos between two different types of manufacturer. So getting back to history, I've seen this before. I was there for Fleetwood. I wasn't there for Avondale. I think that was a bit before my time, and I didn't really deal with them, so I didn't know what happened there. But seeing the lunar thing happen, it was fairly inevitable, and you could see it happening a few years, maybe even before that. The writing was kind of on the wall for them, but long before it actually happened. And the reason that we could see that was because we had this issue where the customers weren't happy with the product. They were getting issues. It was going back to the factory for lots of warranty work, and people were talking about it. This was the days before multimedia, Facebook and YouTube and things like that. They were about, but they weren't really being used. So this was before those times, really. So people weren't talking as much as they are now, but still the word was getting around that the Lunar product wasn't very good, and they were going back to the factory and having leaking. We've all heard leaky Lunars, and I thought that was a little bit unfair because the older ones weren't too bad, but it was just, it's a thing that people say. But when we got to the point where I then moved down to Cornwall, and I always look at other manufacturers, see what they're doing, whether we can sell them or find a niche in the market somewhere where they're not being sold, which down here there's not many. There's only Bailey and Swift. Back then there was only Bailey. So I was looking around thinking about maybe taking Lunar on, and obviously I know lots of people at the show, so I'd go and have a chat with some of my friends on the stand, and basically I was told not to go near them because the product's shocking, the backup's not very good, customers don't like them, and within about 5 minutes I kind of walked off and think, oh no, I'm not going to be doing that. So that's the reason that I'm doing these videos now and talking about this, is because the feeling to me is very similar to what it was back then with Lunar and with Fleetwood and maybe Avondale, I'm not sure. But the dissatisfaction with the product, and it could just be a small issue. Like I said before, I don't know how big this issue actually is. It could be very small. It could be bigger than I think. It's going to be very difficult to find that out. But the one thing I do know is that it can compound very quickly. So if you've got dissatisfied customers talking about the product, and it's even worse now because we've got owners clubs, Facebook owners clubs, we've got the YouTube channels, we've got people like me talking about it, which again, it probably shouldn't do, and I do get told off about it. I have a few dealers say, why are you saying this stuff? We're trying to sell these caravans and you're really not helping. But to me, that's not the point. I could bury my head in the sand and not say anything about this and just let everyone crack on with it, but I just don't think it's going to end up in a good place. It's much better to talk about it now, get it out there and try and do something about it than just forgetting about it and let it run its course, because of what's happened in the past. And it does feel to me like very similar to back then, where, like I said, people are talking about it. You've got dissatisfied customers that aren't in that buying circle. So what we used to see a lot of, and we used to really like, is a customer had a caravan for 3 to 4 years. The money would kind of stack up, so it was a good time to change. The manufacturers would come out with something that made the customer want to change, new upholsteries, new piece of technology, something like that. So then they'd come to the show with a 4-year-old caravan and they'd want to change, and the figures used to stack up. That's the ideal situation. So you get them into this buying circle where they're changing every 3 to 4 years, and that's the holy grail. That's the best thing to happen, because if you've got a customer in a product, that should be the best. That product should be selling the next product. That's how the manufacturer should be working. Is if they've got someone in a product, the last thing they want is for that person to be dissatisfied and think, I'm never going to buy one of those again. And if you scan through a lot of my messages, that's what I'm seeing. Even this morning, I got someone a message this morning saying that I've had too much trouble with this product and the dealer, and I'm thinking about packing up. And if they don't even do that, then they're certainly not going to buy another one. So that's the problem that we've got. And like I said, I don't know how big that issue is. It could only be a small percentage of the people out there, and I'm blowing this up, out of proportion, and I'm not helping the situation. That could be it. But I'd rather do that and be wrong, and then maybe get someone to listen and think that we can change the way to do things. And I'll talk about how I think we can do that in the next video. So learning the lessons from previous manufacturers that have gone under. I'm not saying that anyone is going to go under, but no one is infallible. It can happen. No matter how big you are, it can happen. And it certainly is going to affect the bottom line at the very least. Even if a manufacturer doesn't go under, then the bottom line is going to be affected by this, and that's not what they want at all. So that's a bit of a background to why I'm stood here still saying these things. I have been in this situation before. I do find it difficult to sell products that I haven't got confidence in. And that's, I think, why I've gone, I've said this before to other manufacturers in the position, because I wanted to sell the products, but I couldn't, really get behind them. We can see what's happened before in the past and what's happened to other manufacturers, and the similar feeling is bubbling around about now as to what was then. I do understand that this isn't the best thing for me to do as a caravan salesperson, is to tell you about all the issues and bring it out in the open and talk about it. And I probably will get some flack for that. I don't know, I'm only a small little YouTube channel and I'm just some bloke stood in front of a camera saying stuff. So I don't know if anyone would take any notice or whether it, really matters. I'm sure the industry was going to bubble along quite nicely without my input. So I can't think that I'm going to have too much influence in it, but it's just a shame. If it does end up going down that line, down that route that other manufacturers had, and we're struggling as it is. People aren't buying caravans for other reasons, for economic reasons, for the cost of living and all the stuff that's going on in the world now. The last thing we want to do is compound that issue by the products not being very good, and the very people that should be bigging up those manufacturers and dealers by owning the products and having a really positive experience. They should be the ones shouting from the rooftops, buy another van, go out and enjoy yourself and go out caravanning. But they're not. Unfortunately, they're going on the forums and saying, my sunroof keeps cracking, well, I've done this, I've done that, I'm not going to buy another one. And that is only compounding the issue. It is certainly not helping the issue. And again, in the next video, I'll talk about it from the manufacturer's point of view, because it isn't as clear cut as it sounds and just manufacturer bashing. They are up against it. And I'll leave that to the next video. So again, sorry, I've waffled on enough, and I'll leave it there and see you in the next video. So before I say that, do all the stuff you need to do, like and subscribe. Check out my ideal caravan as well, and I will see you in the next video, if you're still there and you're not falling asleep.